Welcome inside the CitrusTV studios for a special Webisode edition of Talking Points. I'm Conor Wight. At the peak of its insurgency, ISIS controlled a third of Iraq's territory, and the fight to push the terrorist group out came at a heavy cost. Urban firefights in residential areas and extensive bombing campaigns has left much of the country in ruins. Now that Iraq has retaken its land, it is time to rebuild. Iraq's Minister of Planning says the country needs over $88 billion to rebuild. So far, a global donor conference has pledged $30 billion in loans and direct investments to reconstruction efforts. Major donors include Saudi Arabia and Qatar, but notably absent from the conference was the United States. Here to break down what this all means are Talking Points analysts Jack Watson and Brandon Ross. Guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, that's a lot of money that they're talking about. They need, $22 billion, they say, for immediate efforts right now, and they need to reach a total of $88 billion. What is that money specifically going to?
Well, they haven't quite gotten to that $88.2 billion mark that they wanted to get to. However, most of the money, well, a large portion of the money, at least $20 billion, according to Iraq's planning ministry head, is going to go to infrastructure, and that's a key need for them. Because if you've seen the pictures of Mosul, you've seen the damage, the extensive damage that has been done by ISIS from their occupation of nearly half the country. You obviously see the need for the airports to be repaired, buildings, schools, hospitals, etc. That's going to be a major concern for them when it comes to appropriating funds.
And on top of that, a lot of it's going to go into private investment for jobs for young people. Obviously, there's a lot of problems with infrastructure, but on top of that, you can't have a functioning city, even if it's completely built, without jobs to fill all the places.
Now, these are crucial projects that this money needs to go to, but there are some concerns given that Transparency International has ranked Iraq as the 10th most corrupt country in the world. They've had several instances of corruption. What are the concerns that the money may not go to where it actually needs to be?
Well, the concerns are very great, as you can see, that a lot of the countries, including the U.S., did not give any direct aid, but in fact gave it in the form of loans. The U.S. has a history of this. They gave a lot of aid to Iraq, between 2003 and 2012. In that time, $6 billion given just vanished, and another $1 billion was wasted.
And 12,000 cases alone in 2016 of corruption were apparently overseen in just a year. So that's going to be a major concern as well. I mean, the corruption of the Iraqi government has been well documented in the past, especially with the withdrawal of the United States in 2011, leading to the instability in the past couple of years.
Now, you mentioned that the U.S. is pledging around $3 billion in a loan package. What does this mean for U.S.-Iraq relations going forward, especially given the rocky history between the two?
That's an interesting question because ever since the removal of Saddam Hussein from office, it's been sort of a quagmire in the Middle East from 2003 onward. Now, a lot of the tension between the Iraqi government that was currently in office right now and ISIS, that's fizzled out because of the diminishing role of ISIS. However, back here in the United States, the temporary spending bill that President Trump just signed, just drawing it back to the United States here, nearly a quarter of that is supposed to go to the military budget. However, there hasn't really been a clear outlined plan to deal with the Iraqi government's reconstruction of multiple cities, of which they've driven the ISIS presence out.
And I think one more point on top of that, they are hoping, I think, that a lot of countries in the Gulf region will sort of unite to help out Iraq. Obviously, a lot of countries are chipping in aid, Saudi Arabia and Qatar in particular. And I think the U.S. is kind of hoping that, especially with Saudi Arabia, there's sort of like a rapprochement between a lot of the countries to sort of waver off Iranian influence.
So ISIS may not have any more concrete territory within Iraq, but ISIS fighters still exist there. There's other terrorist groups that pose a threat. What are some things that Iraq, and by extension some of its allies, what can they do to help prevent ISIS from regaining ground or other terrorist networks emerging?
I think a big part at the top of it, they have to start with reconstruction, obviously, particularly in the Sunni regions. Those regions were hardest hit by the Iraqi invasion, and those were the areas most prone to rising extremism in the past. And so if there's not enough reconstruction there at the start, which Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has not shown too much willingness to do, that could cause trouble. And it's also unclear as to the future of what the plans will be, as there's a prime minister election in May, and al-Abadi will have to fight off a lot of more pro-Iranian political blocs in order to stay in power.
Jack?
If there's a clear infrastructural strength and military strength in Iraq, there's the chance of extremism and terrorism lessens. It all goes back to the Iraqi government's ability to spend these loans smartly and bring a lot of the much needed infrastructural repairs back.
All right, guys, these are some great points, but unfortunately we're going to have to leave it there. Jack, Brendan, thank you so much for coming. Well, that's all the time we have on this Talking Points webisode. For more Talking Points content like full shows, articles, and webisodes, visit CitrusTV.com and follow us on Twitter at CitrusTV News. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for a brand new episode of Talking Points. For Jack Watson, Brandon Ross, and everyone here at Citrus TV, I'm Conor Wight.